This is kind of a bit of a last minute sort of video. So basically I mentioned in the last vlog, hang on, let's try and find the light right, there we go. So basically I mentioned in the last vlog that we were going to go up to our favourite place to do some starlets photography. Now we'd actually called it off because of the snow and because it had been really cold, but now we've decided we are going to go, and I now have to get ready in about 10 minutes, but I'll run you through the kit really quickly before I pack it all up. Okay, so as well as this GH5 with the 12 to 60 on it, I'm also using my old 550D because the pictures on it are still pretty good, and as that doesn't have remote time-lapse built in, I have a special time-lapse remote for it. And then lastly as well is the good old GH4 with the 14 to 42. These aren't necessarily the best lenses, but they work pretty well. The results I've got from them are pretty decent. Obviously I've got 3 tripods. We're going to be out there for about 2 hours, so I'm wrapping up very warm. And as well, lastly, these are the bags that we take. So this is my main camera bag and this is the backup one. And then in there we've got some deck chairs as well. So yes, I better go and get on and pack because I'm behind. Right, I'm going to stop laughing. Okay. Cut to the next clip. No, it's not happening. Right, okay, I'm gonna have to
go up a different angle.
Yeah.
There. Slippery rough.
They're not giving me much space, are they? So I don't know how windy it is, but me and Joel, there we go, we're done. That took about 2 hours, and Dad, who's holding the light, I don't know if you can see him, hang on, point the light at yourself, Dad. I'll point it back over here. So I've had Dad just hold the light up so I can do a little quick video to say we are done. It's absolutely freezing, but I think we got 3 great shots and a load of cool photos as well, so that's always good. And yeah, now I think we're ready to go in and get really nice and warm. I had to cut that video a little bit short because the wind was getting really bad and you couldn't hear what I was saying, but you get the basic gist of it, so that's fine. So I wanted to do a tutorial on how I actually did the time lapses, and just to warn you, I am on the autofocus on the GH5, which is okay, but it's not great, and it's this contrast detection, so the background might pulsate a little bit, and I'm very sorry about that, but I have to hold up some items like this, and this is probably the best way of doing it without having to constantly rack focus each time. So the way I did it, we were using a GH5 as I mentioned, and a GH4 and a 550D, and the settings are pretty much the same across the board. Now this isn't a tutorial on how to do single shots of starlapse photography, or I should say astrophotography. There are better tutorials that include stacked images. If you look on the Micro Four Nerds channel, which is actually what I based sort of this inspiration from, she's got some great tutorials on shooting and editing stacked and multiple exposure astrophotography images. So definitely go and check that out. I'll try and remember to put it in the description. If not, then just go and search Micro Four Nerds and you'll be able to find the videos on there. I'll demonstrate on my GH4, and the first thing you'll want to do is set your camera to manual. There you go. Because the last thing you want in time-lapse is autofocus and auto white balance and auto exposure, because it'll just flash all over the place and look like crap. And then if you're on the GH line, and I think some of the other Lumix G lines as well, I think a lot of them do include time-lapse, although I don't know, so check your camera first, but generally speaking I think they do, and I know the GH4 does and the GH5 does. So if you're on one of those cameras, you want to change this dial here to the last one, which looks like a little clock. That is your time-lapse function. Now, as far as actual settings go, first thing you want to do is frame up your shot. So I'd probably set the shutter to maybe 1/20, bump the ISO up as much as it can, and then just frame up your shot and make sure everything's looking okay, and then you want to actually set your settings. So the settings I've been using are a 30-second exposure, and the widest aperture I can. In this case, this is a 14 to 42 millimeter with the widest aperture of 3.5. Now, there are better lenses to use, obviously, and you should probably use a wider lens, but the kit lenses do work pretty well, and for this I would use an ISO of 800. Obviously shutter is 30. I would set the white balance to about 3200. That's because I kind of prefer the cooler look. You can go a bit warmer if you want, and that's just out of preference because I like my sky to look quite blue. But, you know, if you want to go warmer, it's about kind of testing and seeing what works. So with those basic settings in mind, you want to make sure your lens is set to infinity. There are different ways to do this. On the GH5, I found the best way is, if you're using a native lens, is to use the on-screen readout, which tells you on one side whether it's going more towards macro, on the other side whether it's going towards, it's a picture of a mountain, and that's whether it's going towards infinity. You want to move it so the dial comes just before the red section, and as far as I'm aware, that is infinity focus. It is, in my experience. It might be different for different lenses, but generally speaking, that seems to be correct. I have found on the GH4, at least on this combo, that doesn't actually translate. So the way to do that is just to switch the camera off and on and make sure it's on manual, and then it should default to being set to infinity focus. The other alternative is to use a fully manual lens. Now, this is actually a vintage lens, and because it's vintage, the infinity focus is slightly off. I've had to adjust my speed booster glass element so I can focus to infinity, but that has then meant that these markings are redundant. So I've actually had to create a little marking where infinity actually is. And I have found an experience that does work quite well. So a quick point to mention with the exposure. If you want your stars to be completely still and you don't want any kind of trail or anything, then there's actually a formula for that. So 30 seconds on, say, 12 millimeters, which is 24 equivalent, you will get a little bit of a star trail. Now, I quite like that. I like a tiny bit of sort of trail and blur, which I think gives it a bit more life and movement. But if you don't want that, if you want the stars just to be just star-shaped and no blur, then there is a formula, and I can't remember off the top of my head. If I remember it, I'll put it on screen. If not, just look it up. There's a formula for focal length to shutter speed, which is sort of the longest you can go without creating any star trails. The settings on the 550D are pretty much the same. I couldn't actually find the Kelvin option. It probably is there, I just haven't actually used it. So I set it to white fluorescent light, which is close enough, and I can easily match it in post. So as far as the actual time-lapse goes, I choose to use a 33-second increment. I would have liked to have used 30, but obviously I'm actually shooting the shutter for 30 seconds, and you need to allow the camera between 3 and 5 seconds to just process the image. Otherwise it kind of trips up on itself, and you kind of end up getting errors or nothing records, and it's not great, and you kind of don't get a great time lapse. I normally tend to shoot for about 250 frames, which being PAL, that gives me exactly 10 seconds in the UK. Obviously 240 in the US, or 300 if you're shooting at 30 NTSC. But generally speaking, you probably want to shoot for around about a 10-second shot, but obviously feel free to go longer. Do longer increments if you want. Obviously that'll mean the stars move faster. I'd say 30 seconds is enough to get the stars moving, as you saw. Any less, they might be a bit slow and almost a bit pointless. But if you want to do one every 60, one every other minute, then go ahead. It's more about how much patience you've got. At least with this shoot we did, it was really cold. We were still up there for about 2 hours. I wouldn't have wanted to be there any longer, so I think 33-second increments were pretty good. Now, some older cameras, like my 550D, don't actually have built-in time-lapse. So I bought this remote. You can buy them pretty cheap on Amazon. They're about 30 quid, and you can set the increment, the amount of pictures, a delay, and you can also hold the shutter indefinitely if you want to do like a crazy long exposure. So I think that's ideal for if you're wanting to shoot sort of complete star trails as well. Lastly as well, a little point to mention with the 550D, setting infinity focus on that, I've got this old kit lens, and I think the new ones are focus by wire. Sort of the devil. Don't like focus by wire, but whatever. And this doesn't have any kind of focal markings on it. So normally what I do with this is whilst it's still light, set it to the widest focal length, and then I actually just point the camera at some clouds and make sure and set it to focus on auto like that, and then I hold it, and then that's just locked in place like that. And then when it comes to actually taking the time lapse, I set everything up and then set it to manual, and then that's good to go, and you will get infinity focus on that. So that about covers the basis of it. I have found that the video files produced in the GH4 and GH5 are pretty good, and I've been able to edit them pretty well and not lose too much data and not get too much banding. Obviously, with the 550D, you don't have that built in. All these cameras that I'm using do also take the pictures as well. Now, I wouldn't choose to use RAW personally. You can do obviously JPEG and RAW if you want to edit them, and if you really do want to batch convert them in Photoshop, then by all means. But Premiere doesn't like RAW pictures. You're better off in, well, I think you have to import JPEGs. So I tend to import, you know, the high quality JPEGs with a fairly flat picture profile, and then just create an image stream from that and do an edit that way. Obviously, each to their own. If you want to use RAW and edit them beforehand, then by all means. This is just the kind of the way I like to do it, and I'm still able to get a lot of data from it. When you actually bring it into Premiere, you can do things like adding a bit of pan and movement, and obviously if you have some kind of pan head or a needle crone or something, then obviously you can have some really cool movement. I mean, they are designed for that sort of time-lapse thing, and they look really cool. But if you just got static shots, then just a little bit of panning and or maybe a bit of tilt, it goes a long way and just adds a bit more of kind of effect to it. So I hope that was interesting. I hope I've explained that kind of well. If I haven't, any questions, obviously drop in the comments. We'll be doing a lot more. I've got an actual star-lapse video with some music that you heard a little bit of before. I've written specifically for that. If you're interested in the videos, obviously please subscribe, and notifications would be great. You're not, you don't have to, but obviously notifications if you can. And there'll be more videos. We're trying to upload sort of once or twice a week if we can, and there might be some videos from Danny and Neil and some of the others potentially, but it'll be mostly me for the time being, but we're kind of just building up. So yes, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.